to our next episode of Podcasters. This time, first time in English, with our guest Hans van Dam, founder and CEO of the Conversation Design Institute. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. We're very honored. And we're doing this in English. We're switching to English because the crowd listening and wanting to listen is much bigger than the Dutch audience and the Belgium audience. So we thought, why not expand?
Yeah.
And use you as a guinea pig.
Yeah.
So welcome. Introduce yourself, Hans, because I think most people know who you are, but still.
Yeah, so my name is Hans van Dam. I'm one of the founders, together with Olaf Viges, at Conversation Design Institute. And that's really where people go to learn employable skills for conversational AI, get certification, find their next job or hire. So that's really what we're focused on. And we have 3 organizations right now. So we have CDI Foundation. That's where we work with the entire industry, or as much as we can, to figure out what are the standards for conversational AI. Then at CDI, we train people and teach people these standards. And then at kind of services component, that's where we actually help people implement these standards through consulting, etc.
And but let's go back a bit, because when we talked to each other, you explained to me how you started. And I was really impressed with the logic behind it, because it was really cool. So...
Yeah, looking back, it starts to make sense to a certain extent, right? So I always wanted to be a writer.
Writer as in books?
Yeah, I wanted to write books, and I was also looking at like screenplays. But yeah, I was just like literature nerd, so I studied European literature and philosophy and stuff. So I was always writing, and I thought I was like very good, and turned out I wasn't. But so I wrote like this manuscript. I sent it out to publishers. Nobody cared, rightly so. Looking back. So it's like, I got to do something. So then I discovered copywriting, and yeah, I didn't have any experience. So I just did like a little internship at a startup incubator here in Amsterdam. MIT Stanford VLab, they have like a department here. So I started working there, and I learned about writing copy. I learned about technology. I learned about entrepreneurship and all those things. Then that was good fun. And then I joined a video streaming startup. I was like, yeah, let's beat YouTube. Also didn't really work out, so I got fired from that. And then I was like broke, no resume, nothing to show for it. So I got a job in customer service, and it was on social media because KLM at the time, Dutch airliner, was very active on Twitter.
Yes.
That started when like a Icelandic volcano erupted and people were stranded everywhere.
And no good information anywhere.
Nowhere. So they just started answering questions on Twitter, and that became like a whole customer engagement department. So I worked there for a little bit, and yeah, then I saw kind of customer service be automated by a company, CX company now, CM.com. They were acquired like 2 years ago. So I joined them, and I kind of saw like, oh yeah, automation of customer service. And it was like the old school virtual assistants, like you ask a question and I wouldn't know the answer. And then that became...
the FAQ don't know it bot.
Yeah, exactly, that one. It had like the little pictures of the women on the service page. And but that became more conversational. I think that was like a push from Facebook at the time. They were doing Facebook Messenger, and they would have like the concierge service that turned out to just be 2,000 people pretending to be bots. But... everybody all of a sudden wanted to have conversational interfaces, and nobody knew what to do with them. And I kind of saw that I from writing, I knew how to write dialogues, and I learned about the technology at the startup incubator. I learned about entrepreneurship. Now I learned about the service space. So all of a sudden I'm like, hey, this is just like writing dialogues between people, but then, one of them is in chatbots. So it's like, I can figure this out. So I started exploring that, and first freelance, and I'm still also applying for jobs. And I applied at 2 big tech companies for writing positions. Still, there's just regular UX copywriting, and they both turned me down. And then we started the company, and within 6 months, they were both clients of ours. Yeah, so that was kind of funny.
That's vengeance, right?
That's a good one, yeah.
Okay, but then you basically you're saying you became good in conversational AI because you had the capability to write conversations in a book as a writer.
Yeah, and say conversational AI for us at the time, like I there was no conversational AI. It was like people had chatbots, they didn't know what to do with them. So, all right, let's help them write better, to have better success. And I met my co-founder Olaf, and they had a behavior design agency. So they were all psychologists thinking about user experience design, building websites and apps and stuff. And they'd been doing some chat work, but also not like AI stuff. But we kind of partnered up. For me, it did make sense that, if you have an artificial brain and you got a human brain, they need to understand psychology and technology. And I think he very much represented psychology, and I understood more about the technology. So we're like, that makes sense. Let's figure out this problem together. So we started doing that. And yeah, I think it's just agency work. And then I wrote a blog post that said, yeah, we train our own people at our own academy. And then all of a sudden,
you didn't have the academy yet.
We didn't have any other people either. But,
I love it.
But people started, reaching out, and they were like, oh, there's something here. So we started figuring out, what could a training look like? And it was very much focused on the behavior design part, the psychology part of conversational interfaces. And then one of the larger search engines reached out, and they were launching a voice application. And they're like, this is really cool. Can you help us scale people up? And we can teach you some of the fundamentals, because we were lacking that. So they connected us to all these different experienced conversation designers that have been doing this for 10, 20 years in call centers and stuff. And we everybody said the same thing. It's like, you cannot teach this to anyone. Like, this is so different than anything that's out there. It's impossible. Well, we kind of saw what everybody was doing, and we've been able to capture that in like a workflow that we started teaching people.
So a logical process.
Yeah, it's like, how do we dumb this down, and how do we streamline it a bit more? And actually, what are the steps that everybody's doing? So then we started doing that, and then we still didn't think we were in AI, but it was only when I got invited to AI conferences and I would be on stage
as a speaker.
Yeah. And everybody was like, talking about, nodes and machine learning models, and I have no idea what they were talking about at the time. And I was just a guy that's like, yeah, you should write this, you should write that. And they loved me, and that was like the weird thing. So it's like, because somehow we were like the key to unlocking that potential of conversational AI. And that's like, okay, then stuff started to click of what we were actually doing in the market that we were in, and how we should get organized as a company and stuff.
That's amazing. Because so basically you bullshitted your way in, right?
Well, we knew how to create good chat. Our chat was
I agree,
better, but yeah.
So it was a combination of luck and timing.
Yeah, I think at that particular point, I was probably the only person in the world that could have started that company. Like, I think that's like the strange combination of background, timing, and all of that. It's like, and I had nowhere else to go. So it's like, all right, I'm going to step forward and say, I will focus on this problem. And I would tell clients that it's like, I don't know, but I'll tell you that I'm going to focus on this problem, and I probably have the best credentials right now because this is so new and nascent.
And it's interesting because it takes someone who accepts that in a company to give you that space to do stuff you haven't done before. That's courageous on the other end.
Yeah, but it also tells you how desperate they were, maybe.
Ooh.
Well, so we were dealing very quickly with enterprises that, had invested millions in conversational AI technology, and salespeople had shown up. They'd say you plug it in, and then it just worked. And yeah.
Sorry, that's the biggest joke ever.
Yeah, so they were all like, all right, we've got all this stuff. We're not reducing any calls. Like, and all of a sudden, like, we were speaking their language. Like, this is how you got to do stuff. There's best practices and all that. So we very early on got to work with some of the largest operations in the world, just because we were the only one that was like focusing on their problem.
That's interesting because in all the podcasts we recorded up to now, we see sort of a red line coming back that everybody sees as a problem, that a lot of the times the lack of vision at board level, not because they're stupid, but just they don't have enough knowledge or information, and they just hear from colleagues in the market, it's hip and happening, and oh, we need it too. But they have no clue what they can or cannot do, and what the order of things should be, and how much time you should take, and how what the team should look like. And you're basically saying the same thing. You had to develop that competence and learn, and they allowed you to learn, but they didn't know. And now you know, but they still don't know, because we see a lot of chatbots. You see it in the podcast that we get stuck in, or there's stuff missing, or it's not logical, or it's not from the consumer perspective. It's like, okay, this is inside out, not outside in.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of improvement necessary the way I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, and there's just so much involved. I think that's the
Involved as in technology, or
we look at it 4 quadrants: mindset, skill set, culture, and systems. Where mindset is how someone perceives the work, skill sets the ability for them to do the work, culture is the context within which they do the work, so the strategy and the budgeting, etc. And the systems is the tools they need to do the work. If you look at the culture stuff, like I think that's kind of where in most organizations you'll start with like a small chatbot. That chatbot gets a little smarter, then other people get excited about it. They also want a chatbot, and then before you know, you got 20 projects, and then at one point somebody stands up and says, let's organize it and create one department and figure out what the best practices are. But that that evolves over time, and so you'll find a lot of projects that at one point have been abandoned by the ambassador or the sponsor, or people have left, or
that happens,
or they're in transition to that bigger solution, but that just takes longer. So there's a lot of complexity, and I used to like point fingers and blame, and now like the more we do the work, the more we understand just how complex it is in an enterprise to get these things organized. And what you see is with the scalability of the technology is that you can go from a POC or an MVP to production in the tech very quickly. That's like the switch of a button where you add more channels.
That's it.
But building the culture, building the skill set, that can take years. And that's why you get a lot of these chatbots that are just kind of out of bounds.
So how do you do that as CDI? Because what do you do to, because I see this everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do differently to get that change going? Because it's a process of years. So you need commitment and money, of course.
Yeah, that also helps.
And the people, but basically it starts with the commitment and then the rest follows.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So the first step is to make them see the problem in a way, right? So we focus now more and more on standards and just best practices. So at CDI Foundation, we work with a lot of tech companies, a lot of enterprises, universities to figure out what makes a good AI assistant.
Okay.
Right. So there are fundamental linguistic design patterns that you just need to have. So when we come in, we will look at your deployed assistants. And so you say chatbots, I say AI assistants. CDI sees the world as building one AI assistant that interfaces with people via chat, via voice channels. So that's what we try to get organizations to do. So we just look at the quality, to what extent are you delivering on these standards that we just know work. And so we look at the assistant, then we talk to all the people in the team, then we talk to all the people around the team to figure out like what's going on here, right? And sometimes, maybe they've overbuilt, or maybe they're focusing on the wrong use cases. Maybe there's just like the skill set isn't there. And most often you just find yourself in a situation where leadership was very excited. They kind of wanted to have the Samantha from the movie here, super integrated, super smart. So they invested in that, expected to have that, but now it's kind of not the case. So the assistant isn't very good, but you have an eager team because they like working on it. So they're kind of desperate. Like they want the education, they want to get better. They know they're stuck, but they're not getting the results. So you kind of see the culture around it crumbling a little bit. Or like, they're more, because now we can do blockchain projects all of a sudden. Like we can do
other fun stuff.
Yeah, there's other new shiny tech already. So you see the culture being abandoned. So what we do is when we come in, we do that analysis. We look at, what's going on here. And then we offer a solution where we say, okay, you just need to really focus, kill 80% of your use cases. These 5 people should learn how to do this. Let's work on that. And then we have online courses. We do workshops. We also do workshops for the leadership and everybody in the organization. So we'll have meetups at the organization just to develop a conversational culture and mindset around it.
And how long does it usually take to get from, okay, there's no culture, conversational culture, to, hey, we have a conversational culture, where it goes without saying that we nurture the conversational AI or chatbot or whatever you want to call it. But
well, if you look at like your typical enterprise has done similar projects, right? And so if you look at kind of the collective history in an organization, those failed projects are part of the current chatbot, right? So there's a lot of trauma almost that is part of these projects. So a lot of those people are often in the way, and it can just take a very long time because they'll take the practices or the learnings from maybe 10 years ago and apply it today. And some of it makes sense. Some of it is completely useless. So it's
And
kind
the
of
technology is way further.
yeah, but that's kind of where the complexity sits. So the younger the organization, and you show up and there's no legacy, and you're like, all right, let's do this and get everybody together and make them part of the process. It can go fairly quickly. Otherwise, it may take a long time. So it's sometimes we will have recommendations where, our recommendations can be about restructuring the team, but also changing the leadership a little bit, or just kind of
The ownership, maybe.
Ownership and like personality. It'd be good to have these kinds of people around the projects to keep the energy high, and it can go from very hands-on to really digital transformation where we come in with our recommendations.
Yeah, because what we saw in previous recordings is that there is not enough connection between the channels. So you have a chatbot channel, and it's a customer service channel, but it's not connected to the other channels. So if you get stuck, there's no way out. We saw that in the previous recording.
Yeah, but if you, that's the dream that everybody has, to have, omni-channel, contextual, personalized, proactive AI assistants. But then you're already, like, if you look at it, your AI assistant goes from like a baby, full potential, and then it becomes a little bit like a toddler and a teenager and an adult and a wise.
And we're talking about the grown-up.
We're talking about
almost the retired one.
We're talking about very educated, fully integrated, grown-up AI assistants, and it's going to take a while to get there.
How many companies do you know that are already there? That are living our dream?
Well, you would have some companies that started out as conversational AI companies, like therapy bots or something, that really have been launched as conversational companies. They can do that because they don't have that legacy. They built their entire tech stack. But yeah, if you put in phone lines 20 years ago and then you added live chat and they added social and you're using different,
then you have the multi-channel or omni-channel.
Then it gets very complicated very quickly.
So basically you're saying that if you would have a startup where you choose a channel or conversational strategy, then you're likely to get ahead faster and get further than a company that has omni-channel and needs to connect all these channels. Yeah,
because also you might have, everybody wants transactional experiences, right? That's super cool. Yeah, we can have longer conversations. If you can have longer conversations, that already means that you need to design for trust. Because they
won't stay otherwise.
Yeah, so cooperative principle, pareidolia, these are concepts that, people lose themselves in conversation. If I'm 5 turns in, I need to start building trust. And if I want to do transactions like that, those are long conversations. I really need to understand how to do that. Otherwise, I can build all the contextual omni-channel experiences that I want. People are going to drop out because they don't feel comfortable. Right? So you can't just do, all right, let's just build this and then we have better channel management and we can call them back, etc. Then at the same time, it's also the skill set of what you're going to do with those channels. Then it's about the culture that provides the budgets and the space for people to actually build and develop in that way.
And they need backing of the management. This way, we're moving through the organization and then the yearly budgeting process, and we're back at the board.
Exactly. So it's always the 4 quadrants: mindset, skill set, culture, systems. You cannot work on one individually. You always need to work on them as a collective.
And often you see that managers work on one and not on all of them at the same time. And that's where the problems start.
Yeah. And if you would then look at kind of like what's your altitude of development for an AI assistant, am I a baby or a toddler? That says something about the systems that you need, what the culture looks like, what the skill set is that you need, and how you approach the work.
Do you see a lot of companies that come in and say, oh, we want AI, conversational, chatbot, whatever, give it a name. But we want to start at a grown-up level. So give us a grown-up solution, and not taking the time or wanting to take the time to go through the growth stages, which you're saying there are.
I mean, Yes, and some of them are serious about that. Others are just like inform me.
Is it possible?
Um, it could, but you're gonna start building your infrastructure differently because you can't build on the mainland. Like if you start building on the on the mainland at an enterprise, you're touching all the other systems. If you're saying like, here's a whole new setup, whole new stack, go build it.
Blank page.
Blank page, new infrastructure, build it, run it simultaneously with the old stuff. It could be possible. I mean, it's very pricey. You need to give us full control
And a big team.
Yeah,
I presume. Cause,
yeah. I mean, big team, big budget, and give us full control. Then it's definitely possible. But if you build as an organization, it doesn't make sense, right? Because you got,
No.
or are you going to fire everybody? And
you're saying you're going to fire everybody. It's one of the things. I think it's a wrong preconception of a lot of board members that, hey, if we introduce a chatbot for customer service or conversational AI or whatever term they use, then we need less staff, right? You know we need fewer people.
We can start relocating resources.
Yeah, and I listened to that. I'm like, okay, guys, this is a joke because you need to organize a team around your bot, which you need the expertise of the people who are in the customer service department, and these are the people that actually know what the customer wants and needs. So these are the people you need to retrain to work with the chatbot. So how do you push that preconceived notion off the table and say, okay, actually, you're going to spend more money, not less?
Yeah, you got less. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of changing though. Like I think a couple of years ago, this was definitely what everybody was talking about. Oh, right. Robots are taking over jobs, and
people were scared.
People were scared. We would show up and we do like have like a kickoff meetup, and we do like a workshop, and you would have 50 people there from the service department. They all wanted to be part of it, and then as soon as they saw what we were doing and how hard it is to design a chatbot, they were like, okay, well, we're safe for the next few years, right? But it's like everybody says, like you're just taking out a lot of the repetitive tasks and those sort of things. So for the people that just stay in live service, their job is more fun and more interesting. For people in service, it actually gives a very nice career perspective. So a lot of enterprises have highly overqualified people in their service department.
But you need them.
Yeah, but it's a lot of people, they go in customer service when they're in college. And then when they graduate, they go into the next job. So how do I retain that talent? All of a sudden, when you have an AI program, you can actually bring those people into your conversational AI department. So there's a lot of benefit there, the growth potential for people in service by building these chatbots. So yeah, I've not seen a case where a whole service department was exited because the appearance of a glorious chatbot.
But secretly, the boards want that, right? I think a chatbot or conversational AI should be about scalability, because it allows you to scale up or down quite easily.
I mean, over time you'll see changes, but it's not that transactional. Right, it's like it's like it's not when the car appeared and all of a sudden all the horses got fired from their jobs. Like there's the transitional phase. Now looking back, it's like, oh, what, maybe 10 years from now, we're like, hey, actually we have fewer service people. Why is that? Well, they're all conversation designers now. They're doing something else because we started doing these chatbots. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it's not like from day one or like off you go. And I think this is very, if you look at conversational AI, they're kind of like 4 business use cases where you reduce cost, and that's the one that we always talk about, right? It's like call deflection. But you can also use it to grow revenue, grow reputation, and increase productivity. Those are kind of like the 4 main categories. So then you're only really focusing on one as well, right?
And I think that eventually you won't be successful, because if you're just reducing cost, you're also introducing cost on the other side. You need to make decent amount of cost in order to reduce the cost over there.
The cost of ownership is massive in conversational AI, and I think a lot of enterprises are overspending because they don't know what to do. They don't have the skill set. So they have a lot of people with skill sets that are kind of aligned, like around the project. Like I'm a UX designer, so we just have writers, or we have engineers, but none of them are like really know what they're doing when it comes to conversational AI. So we see a lot of times where a company might have 100 people, and we do an analysis. We're like, we could actually do this with half. And so these are not the service people. These are kind of like the fancy, expensive designers and engineers that they just put on the project because they don't know what to look for. So the total cost of ownership of AI assistants is high. You can reduce it, but it's always going to be an expensive operation. That's why you always got to also go beyond just service.
And it never stops, because once you start with it, it's like you need to keep improving it.
Yeah, and you're gonna have 10 extra conversations, right? So now, when people can find you, and this is nice, and they can chat a lot on things where usually they might reach out once a month and be upset because they were on hold for 5 minutes. Now they might check in every week because they know how quick it is.
But that's good news, right? Because that allows you to build reputation.
Yeah, allows you to build a reputation.
Sell them something.
Start those kind of journeys. So it starts with the comparison of like, how do we automate service and kind of maybe reduce some cost there. But actually it's pivoting, it's transitioning us into a different environment and where we're going to use AI to talk to people in any capacity, in any department, in whatever we do, we use AI to talk to people. Wherever you're having conversations, you got to be looking at streamlining that a little bit with AI.
And having said that, how do you perceive, or what do you think the future is of something that, people think is also hip and happening, but we're talking about conversational commerce. I'm surprised how little companies actually end up in WhatsApp or Signal or whatever to personalize their offerings to me and be close to me, because it's so easy, and still require me to log into an app or a website where I really don't want to go.
Nobody said it was easy. That's the and sometimes when it is easy, people that want to feel significant in their job don't allow it to be easy because they need to make it complicated to justify their own presence.
Why I'm wondering about this, because in Corona time, everybody started ordering everything. So we gave our mobile phone numbers to everything and everybody.
Yeah.
Having said that, we allowed them to use it. And I would be more than happy to, okay, if you ask me if I'm okay with that, I'll say okay.
Yeah, I'm all in. Yeah.
And personalize my offerings, and I don't need to look into any advertisements or whatever. Just make it personal.
Yeah, but I mean, so there is the thing is like, we can build an entire personalized offering module, or I can actually write 2 sentences that gives you the impression that it's personal. Right. So this is, I think, where a lot of stuff in conversational AI in general, like everything is looked at as an engineering problem. And, if you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly.
But a lot of times, we can write stuff in a way. So where it maybe takes 2 sprints to build something like that, it can take a conversation on in 5 minutes to give you the impression
that it's personal.
That is personalized.
But that's fine too.
Then exactly. And that's where you can save a ton of money as an organization.
Yeah, because if I give you information about me in a conversation, you could use that to feed the AI and make an offer.
Yeah, but you can also so this is kind of where, is the objective of the company to create a personalized offer? No, the objective of the company should be for people to feel like they belong there and that they're recognized as individuals and therefore they feel comfortable buying. So it's
the confidence part.
Yeah, it's like the human-centric approach in a way, right? So it's like, we need to get personalized offers. Like, no, you got to make people feel like you recognize them as such and give them an offer that they like. That's a very different problem.
I get it. But there comes this other discussion sort of comes in between here, is that, and again, I think it's a generational thing where I ask the question now to every guest, do we, as a consumer, do we have to learn how to communicate with computers? Right? Or do we teach the computer, that's, there's the conversational piece, to communicate with people? Mm-hmm. And if I ask my kids, they use 2 words to communicate with the computer. Basically, it's a yes or no, 0 or 1 model. Yeah. But if you ask me, I will type a full sentence because that's polite. Yeah. And that's how we were brought up. But again, if you test a bot and you put in 2 words, and some bots you get quicker and better results, and other bots are just made to make full sentences. So maybe it should analyze how I communicate and then adapt One of the previous guests said, yeah, maybe we should have like a Grammarly with the house style of the company, and then have it adapt to or filter the AI to adapt to age or how you communicate. So if I see that, notice that you are communicating with 2 words, hey, I can answer you with 2 words. If I'm making full sentences, you're polite as a, not you, but
well, this is one of the, so I think, do machines learn to speak to people, or do people learn to speak to machines? And both. And you probably end up in the middle, and there's flexibility there and adaptability. I think the goal of an AI assistant should never be to speak in the most human way. I think that's like a misconception. Nobody cares for that. At the end of the day, the goal is to use language because it's so powerful and touches us so deeply in our brain that we can use language very effectively to help people get things done. And I think, again, that's a very different approach. It feels slightly different, but it's a radically different approach.
Oh, it's radical.
Different, they create your conversation. So then for some people, yes, brevity, simplicity works. For some people, also, like if you say, I started Marcel Proust when I asked my questions, and I take 2 pages.
Yeah, that's a bit too much.
Might be a bit too much, but yeah, you like a little more language. Perfect, but it doesn't mean like when I speak back to you as an assistant, I use simple active language. You're going to be very comfortable with that, right? So it's still like, how do you make it easy for people to read, to digest, to go through it, and keep them activated? And they're just very effective principles for that. So a lot of these discussions have to do with like the initial outreach, where, because I know you're trainable too, where you start with maybe not Proust, but maybe different, I don't know, Gerard Reven. Let's go with Reven. Also long sentences. If that chatbot's like, hey, by the way, I have a chatbot, more effective if you leave shorter sentences, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, actually, some of the chatbots we tested, they said, okay, write me in a full sentence or keep it short. And I think if they would even say, okay, you just use the words that are relevant to your question, of course, you should say that differently. But then I think a lot of people say, okay, so I want buy new car. Let's say,
buy a new car, but then as your corpus grows, because companies will be adding to scope more and more, so you can have more competing intents. So you're already going to need more detail, right? So there's
well, that one of the things we see is that why a lot of the bots are failing or are not good enough yet. It's because they try to put everything in the one bot.
Yeah.
And that's, well, in my opinion, that's impossible. And it's impossible to get a stable bot. Whereas if you have, okay, we need to run this process, we put it in a separate flow or a separate bot. And then the main bot detects, oh, this is what you want. We connect you to the right bot, but it's a different process.
Well, you can have the same interface with different bots feeding into it, right? Yeah. And bots or
processes.
There's definitions there, but as you grow in intent, you have more conflict and more competing intent. So then you start building a qualifying layer on top of it, right? So
and add complexity.
Yeah. So what you'll have is kind of have these verticals kind of in your corpus, and then you've got a qualifying layer, but that can grow infinitely and get to a certain scale. That's also one of the reasons why some people say intents in general don't scale. And we should move away from the machine learning model altogether and go into more linguistic model. So Pad AI is one of the companies that's an advocate of that have a radically different approach.
And what do you think?
Well, you've also got the hybrid models. I mean, I'm not a machine learning expert. I think it is. Yeah, you cannot structure everything. So if I'm an organization, like how many am I going to have 1,000 intents? Like I think you can still build that and program that, but you're always going to be training them. Whereas if you use linguistic models and knowledge graphs, maybe you can get to that scale much faster in a more cost efficient way. But that's not my expertise. But we do see the different movements now, and I think a lot of companies are hitting a wall with intent models.
Yeah, because they keep training, and then the customer keeps asking stuff that's not in there, or
language changes, products change. It's not,
and language is different between generations.
Yeah, so that's inclusivity is very important, right? It's like I want to understand people's, linguistic preferences because it's very important for my identity, how I
Yes.
speak, right? So if I feel ignored, that really hurts the customer
And it
relationship.
connects you to the brand.
Yeah,
Language is also the connector.
yeah, it's the connector, but it's like, it's my identity. Then there's language ability. So I want to have a lot of variety in there and what I understand, right? But that also means that I'm even going to have more conflict in my intents because there's so many different ways. If in a credit card company, somebody says like I can't pay, there's like
Then what?
there's 100 directions that can go, right? So it is, intents. It's very structured, very nice. It works. You can train them, etc. And when you really get the scale, I don't know.
You put a slide deck on the screen. There's something you want to tell us.
Oh no, yeah, I put that up like at the beginning a little bit. So these were, where is it? Yeah. So this is the kind of, we look at the altitudes of development for AI assistants.
Yeah, take us. We there's people that listen. There's people that view. So you should explain what they're looking at.
Yeah. So maybe we should start with this one. This is kind of the graph that we put companies at. So vertical axis you see scope, horizontal axis you see experience, and top right corner value. Every consultant in the world will tell you when you see a graph like this, top right corner, that's where we want to go. That's where you have a lot of scope and a great delightful experience, right? That's where companies are striving to be. But yeah, it's difficult to get there. So we always say, the more conversations you have, the better they should be. So as you start adding to scope, you start adding to the level of experience. And that's
because otherwise people leave.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm starting out with an FAQ bot, like you ask a question, I give you the answer. Perfect, job done. But if I'm doing multi-turn conversations, all of a sudden I need to start thinking about consistency and tone, about building trust. If I want to do transactions, I get to a next level when I want to be thinking about behavior design and psychology. How do I guide you through these journeys? So as the scope increases and gets more complex, that's when I need to start investing in more advanced skill set around experience. So this is really what we do is then, look at companies like, where are you? And what you see is a lot of companies, they build for scope, right? So they build all the tech, they add all the use cases, they do all of that, but they're up here, they're not getting value because they are underdeveloped in the skills and the experience.
So they're building technology, but they forget the customer.
Exactly, because it's fun to build, right?
So it's interesting because they take a technological approach. We need to have a bot, so we get a bot. We have AI, we have machine learning, what have you.
Yeah,
and in the end, they have nothing.
Yeah, tech companies are great at sales, and they'll fly you out for a conference, and they'll take you to dinner. It's great. It's good fun. So they end up here in no man's land.
Okay.
Right. But what you want to do is simultaneously, like as you start adding to scope, you want to start adding more to the customer experience and get better at and develop that. So if you look at scope,
it sounds like the regular feedback loop or in growth hacking, where you have a sprint, you deliver something, you put it out there, you get the customer feedback, and you do the next sprint where you're improving based on the customer feedback.
Yeah, in a way, but yeah, so there's some similarities, but for scope, like what are the drivers for scope? It's your IT infrastructure, right? So if I want to increase my number of conversations, I can add more channels, I can add more integrations, I can add more languages. Yeah, so you got all the IT and then you got all the use cases.
Okay.
So that's, if you look at use cases, kind of where they come from, if you have an AI assistant, you can reduce costs, grow reputation, grow revenue, or increase productivity. Then you have internal use cases and external use cases. I can talk to customers and patients, but I can also talk to employees and partners and whatever. Then I have existing conversations that I want to automate, but I also have possible conversations.
Did you say conversation? Don't you mean processes? Because what I see, the way I see it, there's a lot of, we call it conversation or processes, whatever. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff that is done now by people and with mistakes and with delays, where if you would just start with a chatbot and then put it into a process, sort of something that connects to the backend, you could make life so much faster,
those
much
are
better.
Possible conversations. So
you call that a conversation.
So there are things that are currently conversations that I want to automate, and then there are processes where I think actually if I use a conversational interface, it would be much easier. So there's a lot of value there as well. And then I have my chat channels and my voice channels. So these are like your drivers of scope in a way, right? And then at CDI,
If we once we start posting this broadcast live or put it out there, maybe you can put one or two of these slides underneath so that people can.
I'll
can
give you
see
like
this.
a PDF. It might be nicer to cut out.
No, we'll put it out there.
Yeah. And then, this is kind of like the CDI workflow. This is how you drive the experience, right? So as you start adding to scope, you're going to start adding more of these proven design patterns and linguistic patterns, and that kind of helps you get to the top right
You
corner.
got Cialdini in there.
Yeah, so once you get to designing for behavior, when I want you to buy, or I don't want you to call, or I want you to do XYZ, longer conversations, I need to start using that stuff.
How do you monitor the ethics of that? Because we know with nudging, you can.
So ethics, before we start any projects, the value that you want to lock in. We want to think long term about AI. We don't want to build something for today. We want the AIs that we create are a reflection of who we are as people. So, and the values that we put in today are going to be there, and then we're going to continue to build on that, right? So at a project, the founding values should be to be human-centric, have empathy, be inclusive, and be goal-oriented. That's when you start the whole project to build on that. Then you get to the stage, when your chatbot first goes live, where you just have fundamental design patterns, acknowledgements, confirmations, prompts, discourse markers. There's a whole world out there. But then you get to tone of voice and persona. Trust becomes more important. When I have more conversations, they become a bit more complex. So that's when I also start building my ethical framework around that. Right? So I want to have scope around accountability. What am I doing with your data? How am I using that? How do you make best use of me? How should you treat me? How do I treat you? What did the team look like that built it? At one point, you want to start adding that to your assistant to have people be able to ask that. So
Okay, one question. What if a company has a product that they could or use the chatbot or AI to push it to consumers, and they know exactly what to do, how to nudge and use psychological techniques, but the product is actually not so good, or the service is not so good for the consumer, or it's too expensive, or it's not delivering the value. How do you proceed? How do you, as a team, the board might say, "Hey, let's we have a hammer. It looks like a nail, so let's use it."
Yeah.
How do you teach a team or tell a team how to say no? Because this is not good for the customer, and if we start pushing it on this channel, we know the next thing that happens is nobody will come to the channel anymore because we killed it with a bad offering.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember a use case with a Dutch lighting company that had a pretty good customer service, and they would actually feed what people said in customer service straight back into the product team. So there's the feedback loop of what are people saying in these chats and what are they saying to the bot, and make the product better. So a lot of times you do have that feedback loop, which is really nice. If your product is really shit,
but has a high margin.
It has a high margin. Yeah, I don't like. I think that's just tricky. Like you need to have you can't just put that on the conversational AI team. But yeah, at one point you're like, we're not selling this, right? Someone needs to say no, right? Somebody needs to say no. I don't know if it's the conversation designer or product owner or, but no, it's an interesting thing. But I think overall, people that really get to the level where they can start applying these types of principles in conversational interfaces in an effective way, they run into this question. They must. Well, they might run into the question, but they're also at such a high skill level where like anyone that is willing to sell crap would not get to, because you're at a very high ambitious level here. No, I understand, but the more companies are starting to use these kind of technologies and having these teams, the more we'll see they will use it in a immoral way to get things to people to do things or buy things that they don't need. Or I mean, at the end of the day, for any boardroom or shareholders, do we want to be a good company or a bad company, right? And this is a broader thing. And if your product is crap, should you shove it down people's throat just because you know how to manipulate them? some companies do that. Some companies will always do that. You got into the thing of like technology can always be used for good and bad, and so can psychology and anything. Right?
True. But I hope our community will say no to that.
We will say no
because it ruins the reputation of chatbots.
So we see it very well. You see it kind of on not here so much, but different parts of the world where WhatsApp is very dominant. You see people, selling crap over WhatsApp, but they're not. Those people creating that are not at an enterprise building a capability around AI communication.
They just want to make money.
They just want to make money, right? So I think anyone, public companies, serious enterprises, they look at these things differently.
And they should be held accountable.
They should be held accountable. And that's why the logging stuff and the governance around it and compliance is important. And that is also part of those higher levels in culture where at a certain point, when you're doing a certain number of conversations about specific topics, you just need to have that stuff in place.
So not only do we need to teach at board level on chatbots, AI, machine learning, but apparently we also need to teach compliance.
Yeah, well, compliance is very, definitely needs to be educated. What we see a lot of is that, compliance has a very strong voice in an organization. So you would have a team that, is trained properly, knows how to create stuff, but they don't really know how to articulate the decision making in having created the experience. So they'll go to compliance or any legal department. They'll be like, yeah, that's not how we talk here. And they shut it down. And that's when you end up with those really shitty bots again. So we like
they have to take routes that they don't want to take because compliance says no.
Yeah. But what you see though, is if you make compliance part of the cultural development, is a big chunk of it. If you teach your designers very well how to articulate their decision making, you will see like 2-3 sprints where they just inform compliance, get the sign up. Then compliance be like, all right, you guys know what you're doing. We trust you. So a lot of teams are very ineffective because the heart of the team is not strong enough and they don't know how to advocate for themselves. And therefore there's never trust in what they're doing and it gets shut down by different departments. But if you make the other departments part of a broader educational program and you really skill up the heart of the team, all of a sudden they're in charge, everybody trusts them, and they can create value for the organization.
That actually makes perfect sense because the project we did in a financial services company, we had compliance on it and in it the whole time. And that really, really helped because most people don't understand the hardship and the pain you have to go through to go from, okay, we just have technology to we have something that actually works and is successful and is coloring within the lines. It's extremely difficult.
It's very difficult. And it's like...
people have no clue.
And you also got to respect their job. Like there's a reason those departments exist. Like we used to do work in pharma quite a bit. That's very tricky, right? Because then you got medical writers that first write to stuff, and then the designers take over and it gets signed off on. There's all this regulation. There's a reason these people exist. So you can't just go in and like, yeah, we're going to go chatbot and create a good experience. It's like, when you talk about the 4 quadrants, what you'll see is a lot of times, people will speak from a different quadrant. So engineers will speak from systems, and business people speak from culture, and designers speak from skill set. And you might not always understand what the other person's saying, but you should understand that what they're saying is meaningful. So there's never, there shouldn't be disagreement. We all are equally right.
But from our own perspective.
Yeah, so we're all equally right. So we need to create a framework in which we can have a shared language so that we can have meaningful conversations.
And that's where CDI comes in.
Well, that's what we do, yeah.
No, but it's actually interesting because you create the conceptual framework and the common language where people can actually talk to each other and understand what they're meaning. You see, if you look on LinkedIn or online, you see so many people communicating one aspect from their point of view. Yeah. You look at it, it's like you could be right, and then you see something else on the same topic. It's like, but that makes sense too.
Yeah.
Using different language.
This model is created for that. This
model, what you're showing on the
what we say.
Maybe we should explain for the people. It's altitudes of development. You see high fidelity, design for behavior, persona and tone of voice, fundamentals, and founding value lock-in.
Yeah, so this is like the lowest level is kind of the baby that we talked about earlier, right? And then go into adulthood. So just like people or society, you just start at a very low level, and they have the different altitudes of development. And what we say per altitude of development, you have different standards assigned to it. And these standards are part of the experience, but it's also what does the culture look like? What kind of technology do you need for each level? So we have this model where we say different levels of AI assistance, figure out where you are, have consensus about what you're trying to do and where you are, and then, what do we need to do around culture and systems, etc. And it's a very open framework that through the foundation, we bring in everybody that, wants to influence that or be part of that, to just create, a way for people to come to talk about these very complex things.
Yeah. And if you say foundation, that means you're sharing it at no cost, or?
Yeah. So CDI Foundation, we have great partners there like Microsoft and Salesforce and lots of others and some universities. And together we try to figure out what the standards are, right? And
but scientifically.
Yeah, so there's a lot of science back. There's a lot, back through the data that we see and the experience that we have. Right?
Okay.
So collectively, we try to figure out what makes good AI assistance. But then you get such a long list of standards that, I can't teach you that overnight. So we need to look at like what are the different levels at which you need what. So that's what we try to do at the foundation. We have a manifesto that calls for alignment, and then collectively we try to figure out what the standards are. We organize a conference twice a year where we present as much as we can. We have scholarship programs.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's, for some people, it's harder to get into the industry. And if, like I said, if AI is a reflection of the people that create it, we want to have diversity in our community as well. So those are some of the things that we do through the foundation.
I think that's very commendable.
Well, thank you so much. And then we, of course, do have educational programs that we sell, right? So
you have, of course, you have to run a business. I understand that. Looking at this model, of course, every week we, not this week, but every week we test a chatbot or something in WhatsApp or online. Would you say that you have like, based on the standards you have, we could use that to put a chatbot to the test and then define where they are?
Yeah.
Is that something we could use?
Yeah, that's something you can definitely use. I'm also building a product for that, actually. But
you're not trying to sell me something, right?
I wouldn't dare to.
Okay. Cool.
No, but I mean, when you look at
that was a lie, right?
Oh, selling. No, stop doing that long ago. But no, yeah. So they're very simple things. When you look at a chat, when you look at a chatbot from outside in, like as a customer. Yes, there are certain things that you can spot immediately where like these patterns you're not using and we know they perform better. But at the same time, you don't really know what the intent was behind the whole project, right? So only judging stuff and benchmarking stuff on these standards can tell us something. It can tell us.
So you need to crawl into the company.
Yeah, we can see to what extent they're applying those standards in those use cases, but we don't know what the thinking and the reasoning and the intent behind it was, right? So
I understand, but still, you see we look at it from a consumer perspective. So we go in there. If a chatbot tells us you can ask me anything, we will ask anything. Yeah, and then it doesn't know the answer, of course.
But it's not hard to break a chatbot. Like that.
No, it's not hard to break a chatbot, but of course not. We prove that our purpose is not to break chatbots, but to see if they're good, if they're delivering the value you would want as a customer from that company. Yeah. And where the opportunities for improvement are. It's easy to say it's not good.
Yeah.
It's more difficult to say.
Yeah, and you see the same mistakes everywhere, right? So there's bad framing in the opening. Like if you talk a little bit about scope and in these journeys, bad openings that doesn't give a clear direction. They're very limited in scope because they're making themselves vulnerable from the get-go. But overall, what we see is not active language, too long in content. We just have to one breath test. If you can't say it in one breath, it's too long.
Yeah, you see these enormous amounts of text trying to tell me the world.
Yeah, not human centric. So instead of saying, how can I help? I can do this, I can do this. It's more, what would you like help with, right? So active language, simple language, human-centric language, then follow the pattern of acknowledgement, confirmation, prompt, making it very clear what the objective is. Reducing cognitive overload by not showing too many options. These are the basics, like a top 10 list that you see everywhere and go wrong, or a lot of places.
And they're so easy.
They're
relatively easy to apply.
They're relatively easy to apply if you're not stuck in that operation all day.
But that's so you're saying actually that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, it always helps to have an outsider in your room that doesn't know all the
Ask the nasty questions.
Yeah, but a lot of times, like, sometimes, yeah, this is the answer, but in some cases it's this, and in some cases it's that. We'll put them all in. Whereas actually, the outsider would just say, that's the majority time the answer, and then that's what we're going with. Right?
Yeah, because what I also see, they try to put the exceptions in a bot. Yeah. Whereas if you can cover 80% and the rest go to a live agent, you make your life a lot easier and the bot much more effective.
Yeah, it's a long tail, right? So you want 80% of your traffic will go through 20% of the journeys. Exactly. So you focus on those high volume.
And they need to be perfect.
They need to be perfect. So yeah, you want to do that, and you decide where you hand them off also there to agents and where you get stuck. And you can do a much better job at repair. So a lot of times Shep will be like, hey, I didn't really get that. Hey, I didn't really get that. That's it, right?
That's annoying.
It's really annoying. And there are techniques to get people back in. So if you decide that these are the people I'm going to help because I know I can help them, then you should work your butt off to actually keep them in the journey.
Exactly.
And that has to do with escalating detail and more advanced repair, which a lot of them don't get to because they're stuck, in doing other stuff.
But were these people trained at CDI?
Some of them were, yeah. And then,
they need to come back?
They need to come back. No, but I mean, it's the, what a lot of people don't. Yeah, so I do give credit. It's like I understand why it's so complex. Because if your boss tells you do this use case, and what you now need to do is go into some knowledge base that's like hidden in the organization. You get like a 2-page article, and that needs to become a conversation. So you got to read the whole thing, make sense of it, and you just get caught up in it. And then you need to create something, right? So to go from looking up the information, analyzing it, turning it into a conversation, all of those things, while your manager's breathing down your neck, not giving you enough time to do your proper CDI workflow, because then you would do it differently, you're going to create stuff that is not as good. That's why it's always good to have a, second writer there that's just going to take your first draft and then knock that out of the park. And I think that's a lot of times when we're so happy that we got somewhere, but it's like, now you need to improve. It's the same with writing. Like, for a lot of people, it's very difficult to fill the page, but for a writer, that it's first easy. Draft, you jam it out, and then the writing begins, right? So
yeah, the editing.
Yeah, so and that's where I think a lot of
that's when I write something. I usually write too much, and then I start
taking it out. Yeah,
taking it. It's easy to put it on paper, and then then it's difficult to make it an actual good story or a good conversation because there's too much bullshit in there.
Yeah.
We're always over communicating.
Yeah, we do way too much. So for like the core of the CDI workflow, and you can do this in very advanced degrees, or you can do the most simple way. The most simple way is before you take any use case, you just kind of want to be mentalizing the context of the conversation. And what it means, if you don't have time, why don't you just sit now, take 5 or 10 deep breaths, and just think about who it is you're creating this for. Right? It's like
the persona.
Yeah, just sort of sit down, few deep breaths, think about that. Be mindful of that person. And then, whatever you create, say it out loud. If it sounds written, rewrite it.
Yeah.
Right? Test it with a few people. And that can be with, as little as 2 or 3. Just, I write my script. You can speak freely. I just stick to my script and I get feedback from you, make it better. Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, what are you trying to achieve? How can I write it in such a way that it makes it easier for you to accomplish that goal? That's where you kind of get into the Cialdini things, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that's really it. Be mindful of who you're talking to. Actually have the conversation, validate it and make it inclusive. Make sure it also works for other people. And then try to...
Are you saying testing is important?
Yeah, a lot of testing is important, but testing is one of those things where, you can do like a quick test and just valid, like 80% of the learnings from testing you can do in a very simple way. But because we have UX labs and we love testing and we have people that have jobs called tester, we want to keep them busy. So a lot of these projects just get stuck because we're so occupied with testing and we don't really know what we're testing for when we're doing conversational AI.
My experience with testing is even if you test yourself, there's always stuff that even though you test really, really well, the consumer finds a way to do something with your bot, which you did not think of.
Yeah. So then, testing, yeah, sure. Monitoring, more important.
Exactly.
Right? So and then having the process to feed it back in and just go through it's like the habit of making it an ongoing project and doing some of the right things. And there are a few things that are very, have very high impact, and just do those well. And those are all at that fundamental level, right? You just want to learn those and build an environment in your organization that allows people to execute on those.
Would you say that someone who's in a communications department would be, as a standard, would be suitable to write conversations for chatbots, or in all honesty, they need to be retrained?
Well, no, they definitely need to be retrained. Yeah, like there's nobody that has a job currently that can just walk in and understand this. Like this is very different. This is a job, right? This is.
I agree, but there are companies that think, oh, our communications department who can write for B2B or B2C, they can write this, and
then they get stuck, and then
you get endless discussions like that. That's not what we need. It's different, and you just get stuck in a discussion. Now we have these people that can do their work, but they can't.
Yeah, exactly. And they do it with the best intentions, and nobody's happy. So it creates a very strange environment.
It's not about the people; it's about what their capabilities.
Yeah. So initially, we always say, recognize, develop, and promote conversation design, because it was also the recognition from the organization to say this is a job, and therefore I will give you proper training to learn this and take your time to do that. But yeah, you need to discover that first, right? So
feel the pain.
Yeah. So a lot of people put them like in the department, and then they have no idea what they're doing. And at one point, like they'll find us and they'll give us a call. But we are getting much better at beyond communication, beyond customer service reps, to figure out, what kind of people are good. So we've done research now in conversation design or conversational AI community. What kind of personalities do they have, and what do they look like, and what kind of traits? And
good.
We've built that model now. So if you say, I got 200 people in my organization, we will be able to tell you which 30 would be, likely to perform well in your conversational AI team.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope so.
You have this piece of paper in front of you. There's lots of text on it.
Yeah, it's just the same stuff we had on the slides. Yeah, it's like, let's get organized a little bit here.
If you would be able, if you would have to give a message to people out there who are listening, people who are not in the field, or actually people who are already in the field, but if you could say the one thing in conversation design, and forget about the commercial part, I understand, you have an organization to run, but more on a philosophical level, what would be your message to them to take away from, okay, guys, this is important, it has a certain future, and the way you look at it?
Well, I've like what's driving us in a way, and I don't know if it's fully the answer, but people in AI will be living together and working together, so we need to learn to communicate with each other. And we're going to be interacting with AI a lot, and any interaction is going to influence us, right? So on one hand, the question is, what do we want our relationship with AI to be?
Do we need a relationship with AI?
We have a relationship with AI, and who's the we then, right? So,
exactly.
We can go very deep there. But I think
I asked philosophy.
Yeah, okay. So AI will define what humanity is in a way. So if
that's an interesting thought. That AI.
Yeah.
So we're training AI, and then the AI defines who we are, or what we are.
The majority of what we say and think and do is influenced by AI at one point, right? So the YouTube videos that influence how I speak,
and we have no clue.
Instagram and the ads that I see, we are already like a hybrid thing, right? It's like you're holding your phone like in your hand the entire time.
It's part of your hand.
Yeah, and having a chip in your wrist is not very different anymore. So yeah, if we're going to be using AI at scale to talk to people, what do we want those conversations to be like? And I think for enterprises, these are very fundamental questions. What's the DNA of my company? How do I want that to be reflected in the marketplace? And what do I care for? But it's also, I think, for lots of people in the world, and we expect like 10 million people will be working in this field. If you're a non-engineer, this is an amazing field to get into because, there's a lot of demand, but you're going to be working on important stuff. And sure, where's my package tracking isn't the most, honorable use case, but
Actually,
you are
it is.
contributing to a very, well, in a way it is, but you are contributing to a very big shift, I think, in the world that is, I think, deeply fascinating. So it's an important job, and it will define the future in a way.
Well, basically, you're saying it is humans talking to computers and computers talking to humans. It's already, we're so far ahead we don't even know.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying, because basically we're being influenced by advertisements, YouTube videos, what have you. But we don't think of it. I don't think of it as being influenced by AI, but apparently I am.
You're very much influenced by AI, but people used to be influenced by newspapers or radio. So
or the TV.
Yeah, exactly. So in that regard, it's not very different, of course. But no, it is a big deal, and it's early days, but it's cool to be part of something interesting. And I think particularly for tech industry has been very focused on engineering. A good friend of mine, Lisa Talia Moretti, researcher, she had like this Twitter rant this week where it's like, getting women into tech does not mean get women into computer science, does not mean get women into coding school. No, we need people with different roles than engineering in the tech community, in the AI community.
Asking different questions.
Philosophers, sociologists, writers, those are the kind of people we want to be the bridge for to get into the industry. And I think if you're, I think that's always the most beautiful thing when I'm at a conference and people will walk up and be like, I used to be like a content editor at this utility company. I couldn't care for it at all, but I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. Then I found conversation design, and now I'm at the heart of that team and I love it. Right. And I think there's a lot of people that are like creative that don't really maybe have a place or never had a place maybe in an enterprise environment. Those people all of a sudden, like you see the fire and they're excited about it and they're the heroes now.
They're becoming the voice of the customer.
Yeah.
Because they have to be. Otherwise it doesn't work.
They have to be. And all of a sudden we're in demand. Like these philosophical nerds are in demand, and it's really cool.
Hey, speak for yourself. Hey, anything else you would like to give to our listeners besides me inviting you back for in the near future to look at this model and maybe
test it out a bit?
Test it out a bit on we have a few chatbots already, and just let's put the framework on the bots and see what happens.
Yeah, let's do that. Is there anything else? I don't know. Like, you want to reach out? I'm easy to find.
How can they find you? Hans van Dam.
Conversation
LinkedIn?
Design Institute. Yeah.
Well, I think most people know you.
If you do Hans van Dam chatbot, you'll probably find me. Yeah. Okay. No, reach out. And I think in general, in all honesty, if you have opinions about the industry, if you have a big team, if you have standards, if you have technology, look at the foundation and see how you can contribute.
When we put out the video, or put it on LinkedIn, we'll put the resources underneath so that people can find it.
I appreciate that.
Shouldn't be hard to. It shouldn't be hard to find. It isn't hard to find, but we make it even easier.
Oh yeah, man, you're the best.
Oh, well, no big deal. Well, I want to thank you for this conversation. I really, you're here on Sunday morning, away from your family, so thank you very much. I enjoyed it, Hans.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're coming back?
Definitely.
Cool. Okay, so guys, thank you very much. This was the 9th edition of Podcasters, going for 10, of course. You can see us on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify. Thank you, Hans, and hopefully see you next time.